Have you ever heard of a plane without wings? You might think that such a thing doesn't exist, but it does. And even though it can't fly, it is still called an airplane. It was invented by Leonardo da Vinci. He created many inventions before he actually built them. That's exactly what he did with this invention. He drew pictures of it and left notes about how to build it, but he never built it himself. The weird plane without wings was named the coleoptère. The name comes from the French word for beetle. Can you imagine a giant insect flying through the sky? Well, that's exactly what Da Vinci wanted to do. His drawings show a plane in the form of a giant beetle. It would be 40 feet long and 20 feet wide. It would have two propellers at the back where the wings should be, but it wouldn't have any wings at all. Even though it looked like a huge insect, it wouldn't fly like one either. It couldn't fly because it didn't have wings, but also because it weighed too much. The aircraft's structure would be made out of wood and leather, but it would have a massive weight problem anyway. Since there were no lightweight materials available at the time, it would weigh over 10 tons. This heavy aircraft would have needed a team of oxen to pull it through the air. How crazy is that? How could such a heavy plane possibly take off? It would need a really long runway, longer than the ones we use today. It would have needed at least 1,800 feet of runway to take off. That's almost twice the length of the Empire State Building. If it took off, it would only be able to fly for around 3 hours, which isn't very far at all. With the amount of fuel it would need, it would only be able to travel 62 miles per hour. It would also need 64 paddles to control its direction. That's 1 paddle for every 5 pounds of its weight. Da Vinci imagined that the pilot would sit right in the middle of this massive plane, holding 2 control sticks. They would be connected to the rudder and elevators. The pilot would move them with their hands instead of their feet. Even though it was designed so long ago, it wasn't the first plane without wings. Thousands of years before Da Vinci invented the quadcopter, the ancient Egyptians had already invented a type of wingless aircraft. But how did it work? It was made out of wood and linen and was shaped like a flat plate. It was then thrown into the air, allowing it to glide around for a little while before crashing back down to the ground. It's not quite sure who invented it or why they did. There are theories that it was used in wars or that it was just for fun. Either way, it was a failure compared to other types of planes. But Da Vinci's coleopter was also a failure. It stayed on the drawing board. But why? After all, it seemed like a good idea at the time. The truth is that even though it was designed by one of history's greatest inventors, it was simply too ambitious. Back then, technology just wasn't advanced enough to make such an invention. Da Vinci was about 500 years ahead of his time. No wonder it never came to life. There's nothing wrong with the design of this plane. In fact, it's quite ingenious. It's aerodynamic, and it looks like it would fly well if it wasn't so heavy. It's safe to say that even if the plane had been built, it still wouldn't have flown. Of course, nowadays we know that it's impossible to create such a heavy plane without wings and get it off the ground. But that hasn't stopped people from trying. In 1984, a man named Paul Macready designed the Gossamer Albatross. This plane was special because it was really light. It weighed just 70 pounds. Its wings were made out of plastic film, and its frame was made out of aluminum. Even with its light frame, it was still 70 foot wide, giving it a wingspan bigger than a Boeing 747. It had 2 pilots sitting side by side in a basket. These pilots were pedaling furiously to turn the propeller and give the aircraft forward motion. Thanks to its huge wingspan, it was able to stay airborne for a surprisingly long time. It set a world record for the longest flight by a human-powered aircraft. It flew continuously for 24 hours and covered more than 11,000 miles. It might seem crazy, but there have been even bigger planes than this. The Hughes H-4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose, had a wingspan of 195 feet. It was the largest flying boat in the world. The Spruce Goose was made out of wood and was designed by Howard Hughes. It was originally designed to carry passengers, but then it was converted to a military aircraft during World War II. Unfortunately, it was too late when it was finished. By then the war had ended, and the aircraft was obsolete. It was then put into storage until it was finally scrapped in 1947, but these planes are nothing compared to the largest aircraft ever built. The aptly named Stratolaunch is a modified Boeing 747 that has an insane wingspan of 385 feet. The reason for such a large wingspan is because it's meant to carry rockets. It's not designed to fly. Instead, it crawls across the ground carrying its cargo. When it reaches the end of the runway, it releases its cargo and takes off itself. As you can see, there are lots of different kinds of planes. Some of them fly in the traditional way with wings, while others don't fly at all. Now you know that there is a difference between being an airplane and flying. Something that's called an airplane must have wings. Otherwise, it's not an airplane. And even if it does have wings, it may not be able to fly. Back in 2015, there was a guy called Kevin O'Connell. He decided to try and break a world record by flying the smallest plane in the world. The plane was called the Fire Fury. It was small, but it was still able to fly. Kevin managed to fly it for about 11 seconds. During that time, he covered a distance of 227 feet. That's not very far, but it was still enough to beat the world record. Flying a plane without wings sounds like a crazy idea, but it's actually been done a few times. A man called Franz Reichel did it in 1912. He jumped out of a hot air balloon with a parachute and then opened a canopy to make himself a wing. He managed to glide all the way down to the ground. Another man called Peter Chinnery did something similar in 1961. He jumped out of a plane without a parachute. Then he deployed a wingsuit to help him steer himself towards the ground. He landed safely without getting hurt at all. Of course, there are some animals that can fly without wings. Take the flying fish, for example. These fish are able to jump out of the water and glide through the air. They can do this by flapping their fins really fast. This makes the fish look like it's flying, but it's not actually flying. It's more like jumping. Flying fish can jump up to 65 feet through the air. That's further than a long jumper can jump. The fish also uses its large tail fin to help steer itself through the air. We humans have tried to copy the flying fish for years. We've come close, but we've never been able to invent something that could truly fly without wings. But maybe one day we will. After all, we've already invented planes that can fly underwater. They're called submarines. They're not very good at flying underwater, but they do the job. Now it's time for you to make your voice heard. Comment below. Have you ever seen a plane without wings? If you want to see more videos like this one, remember to hit the subscribe button. That way you won't miss anything. Thank you for watching.